What happens when one of Hollywood's most no-nonsense action stars sits down with daytime television's most outspoken host and things go completely sideways? You're about to find out, and trust me, you've never seen anything like what went down on The View that day. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop your thoughts in the comments because this story is absolutely wild. Jason Statham walked onto The View set that morning, expecting a routine promotional interview for his latest film. The British action star, known for his roles in the Fast and Furious franchise and countless other high-octane movies, had done hundreds of these appearances over the years. What he didn't expect was Joy Behar to immediately go on the attack the moment the camera started rolling. "So Jason," Joy began with that familiar smirk of hers, "I have to ask about something that's been bothering me. Your movies, they're basically just violence porn, aren't they? I mean, when are you going to make something that actually has substance?" The other hosts, Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and Sunny Hostin, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the typical warm welcome guests usually received on the show. Jason, maintaining his characteristic calm demeanor, leaned back slightly and raised an eyebrow. "Well, Joy, I think that's a rather narrow view of what I do," Jason replied in his distinct London accent. "These films employ thousands of people, they entertain millions around the world, and they tell stories about loyalty, family, and standing up for what's right. Not sure how that qualifies as what you just called it." Joy wasn't backing down. She leaned forward, her voice taking on that condescending tone she was famous for. "Oh please, Jason, let's be honest here. Your character basically just drives fast cars and punches people. Where's the art in that? Where's the social commentary? Don't you think you have a responsibility to use your platform for something more meaningful?" Whoopi tried to interject. "Joy, maybe we should." No, it's fine," Jason said, holding up a hand. His jaw was tightening slightly, the first sign that Joy's needling was getting under his skin. "I'm curious to hear more about Joy's perspective on what constitutes meaningful entertainment." "Well, for starters," Joy continued, clearly enjoying herself, "maybe something that doesn't glorify toxic masculinity. Your characters are always these macho men who solve every problem with their fists. Don't you think that sends a terrible message, especially to young boys?" The studio audience was dead silent. Even the camera operators seemed to sense the tension building. Jason's publicist, sitting in the wings, looked like she wanted to crawl under a rock. "Toxic masculinity," Jason repeated slowly, his voice dropping an octave. "That's interesting, coming from someone who's made a career out of attacking people on television." Joy's eyes flashed. "Excuse me? I think you're confusing holding people accountable with attacking them. That's exactly the kind of attitude I'm talking about." "Holding people accountable," Jason said, his voice remaining dangerously calm. "Is that what you call it when you spend 20 minutes tearing apart someone's life's work without knowing the first thing about what goes into making these films?" Sarah Haynes jumped in, trying to lighten the mood. "Maybe we should talk about the stunts in your new movie, Jason. I heard you do most of them yourself?" But Joy wasn't finished. "Oh, I know plenty about your movies, Jason. I know they make billions of dollars selling the fantasy that problems can be solved with violence. I know they perpetuate harmful stereotypes about what it means to be a man. And I know that intelligent actors like yourself could choose to do better." Jason's hands were now clasped tightly in front of him. The camera caught the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way his breathing had changed. "Intelligence," he said quietly. "That's rich coming from someone who just suggested that action films have no artistic merit and that millions of fans around the world are too stupid to understand the difference between entertainment and reality." "I never said the fans were stupid," Joy shot back. "I said the movies were irresponsible." "Right, so the problem isn't with the audience, it's with me," Jason said, his voice growing harder. "Because I choose to make films that people actually want to watch instead of pretentious art house pieces that 12 people see in independent theaters." Sunny Hostin tried to mediate. "I think what Joy is trying to say is—" "I can speak for myself, thank you," Joy snapped, not taking her eyes off Jason. "What I'm trying to say is that actors of your caliber have choices. You could use your influence to make films that challenge people, that make them think, that address real social issues. Instead, you take the easy money and make the same mindless action movie over and over again." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Jason was no longer the relaxed movie star who had walked onto the set 30 minutes earlier. His entire demeanor had shifted, and everyone in the studio could feel it. "Mindless," Jason said, standing up from his chair. The sudden movement caught everyone off guard. "Let me tell you something about mindless joy. Let me tell you something about mindless joy," Jason continued, now towering over the panel. His voice was controlled, but there was an unmistakable edge to it that made everyone in the studio hold their breath. Mindless is sitting behind a desk every day, taking cheap shots at people who actually create something. Mindless is thinking that your opinion about my work matters more than the millions of people who choose to spend their hard-earned money watching these films. Joy's face was flushing red, but she wasn't backing down. "Sit down, Jason. You're being ridiculous." "Am I?" Jason asked, remaining standing. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you invited me here under false pretenses. This isn't an interview. It's an ambush. You've spent the last 10 minutes insulting my work, my choices, and essentially calling me and my fans idiots." Whoopi tried to regain control. "Okay, everyone, let's just take a breath here." "No, Whoopi," Jason said, his eyes never leaving Joy. "I think Joy wants to have this conversation, so let's have it. Joy, tell me, what exactly have you contributed to the world of entertainment? What lasting impact have you made beyond sitting here every day complaining about what other people do?" Joy's mouth fell open. "I've been in this business longer than you've been alive, you arrogant." "Being in the business and contributing to it are two different things," Jason interrupted. "I've created characters that inspire people. I've made films that bring families together in theaters. I've worked with stunt teams and filmmakers who push the boundaries of what's possible on screen. What do? You tear people down for a living." The other hosts were frantically looking at their producers off stage. This was spiraling way beyond anything they had prepared for. Sarah Haynes made another attempt to redirect. "Jason, maybe we could talk about your upcoming projects." "No, Sarah," Joy said, her voice rising. "I want to finish this conversation. Jason, you want to know what I contribute? I hold people accountable. I ask the tough questions that other interviewers are too scared to ask. I don't just sit here and let celebrities come on and promote their garbage without challenging them." Jason laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Challenging them? Is that what you call this amateur hour psychoanalysis? You think you're some kind of hard-hitting journalist, but you're just a talk show host who gets off on making people uncomfortable." "How dare you?" Joy shot back, standing up herself now. "I've been asking important questions about society and culture for decades. Just because you can't handle having your work critiqued doesn't mean I'm going to stop doing my job." "Your job?" Jason repeated, shaking his head. "Your job is supposed to be entertaining the audience and having interesting conversations with guests. Instead, you use it as a platform to push your own agenda and make yourself the center of attention." Joy was practically vibrating with anger now. "My agenda? My agenda is trying to elevate the conversation beyond mindless entertainment. My agenda is expecting more from people who have the privilege of influencing millions of viewers." "There it is again," Jason said, pointing at her. "Mindless entertainment. You keep using that phrase like it's some kind of insult. Do you know what's actually mindless, Joy? Thinking that entertainment has to be miserable to be meaningful. Thinking that making people laugh or giving them an escape from their problems is somehow beneath you." Sunny Hostin tried once more to mediate. "I think what both of you are trying to say is..." "Don't," Jason said firmly, holding up his hand but keeping his eyes on Joy. "This is between me and her now. Joy, you want to talk about responsibility? Let's talk about the responsibility you have to treat your guests with basic respect. Let's talk about the responsibility you have to actually prepare for interviews instead of just attacking people." Joy's voice reached a new pitch. "I am prepared. I know everything about your career, your box office numbers, your critical reception. That's exactly why I'm calling you out." "Calling me out for what exactly?" Jason demanded. "For being successful? For making movies that people enjoy? For choosing projects that challenge me physically and creatively? What exactly is my crime here, Joy?" "Your crime," Joy said, leaning across the table, "is wasting your talent. Your crime is taking the easy path instead of using your platform to make a real difference. Your crime is perpetuating harmful stereotypes about masculinity and violence." Jason stepped closer to the panel, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "And your crime, Joy, is being so bitter about your own irrelevance that you have to tear down people who are actually doing something with their lives." The studio audience gasped. Even the camera operators seemed shocked by the brutal honesty of Jason's words. Joy's face went through several shades of red before settling on a deep crimson. "Irrelevant?" she sputtered. "I've been on television longer than you've been making movies." Longevity doesn't equal relevance. Jason replied coldly. Being on television for a long time doesn't mean you've done anything important with that time. How many lives have you changed for the better, Joy? How many people have you inspired? Because I can tell you about the kids who watch my movies and decide they want to learn martial arts, or the families who bond over watching action films together, or the stunt performers who get work because of the projects I choose. Joy was speechless for a moment, which was probably the first time that had happened in years. When she finally found her voice, it was shaking with rage. You think you're so much better than me, don't you? You think because you can do a few car chases and fight scenes that makes you some kind of artist? I think I'm better than someone who makes a living by being cruel to people on television, yes, Jason said without hesitation. And I think the fact that you can't see the difference between what I do and what you do says everything anyone needs to know about your character. The tension in the studio was now so thick, you could cut it with a knife. The other hosts looked like they wanted to disappear, and the production team was clearly in full panic mode. But Joy wasn't done yet. My character, she shrieked. You want to talk about character? Let's talk about how you... My character, she shrieked. You want to talk about character? Let's talk about how you make millions glorifying violence while real people are dying from gun violence every day in this country. Let's talk about how you promote this macho nonsense while toxic masculinity is literally destroying our society. Let's talk about your responsibility to... Stop, Jason said, his voice cutting through her tirade like a blade. Just stop talking, Joy. The command was delivered with such authority that Joy actually did stop, her mouth hanging open mid-sentence. The entire studio fell silent, except for the hum of the cameras still rolling. You want to talk about real people dying? Jason continued, his voice deadly quiet. Let me tell you about real people, Joy. Let me tell you about the stunt coordinator who broke his back on one of my films and how I personally made sure his family was taken care of while he recovered. Let me tell you about the charities I support that you know nothing about because I don't feel the need to broadcast every good deed I do for publicity. Joy tried to interrupt, but Jason held up a hand and kept going. Let me tell you about the kids with cancer who visit our sets through Make-A-Wish and how their faces light up when they meet their action hero. Let me tell you about the veterans who tell me that watching my films helps them deal with PTSD because it reminds them that there are still good guys fighting the bad guys in the world. The studio was dead silent now. Even the production crew had stopped moving around. Jason's voice grew stronger, more passionate. You sit here in your comfortable chair making six figures to give your opinions about things you don't understand, and you have the audacity to lecture me about responsibility? You've never put your body on the line for your work. You've never spent months training for a role. You've never worked 18-hour days in dangerous conditions to entertain people. Joy found her voice again, but it was weaker now. That's not the point, Jason. The point is the message these movies send. The message? Jason laughed bitterly. You want to know what message my movies send? They send the message that good people fight for what's right. They send the message that family and loyalty matter. They send the message that sometimes you have to stand up to bullies, even when it's scary. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers. And speaking of bullies, Joy, what message do you think you're sending right now? What do you think people at home are learning from watching you attack a guest who came here in good faith? Joy's face was now pale instead of red. For the first time since the interview began, she looked uncertain. I'm not attacking you. I'm having a discussion. A discussion? Jason's voice rose for the first time. You call this a discussion? You've insulted my work, my fans, my intelligence, and my character. You've accused me of contributing to real-world violence. You've dismissed everything I've accomplished as meaningless. In what world is that a discussion? Whoopi tried one last time to salvage the situation. Maybe we should move on to... No, Whoopi, Jason said, still staring at Joy. I think America deserves to see what Joy Behar is really like when someone doesn't just sit here and take her abuse. Joy finally seemed to realize how bad this looked. Jason, I think you're overreacting. Overreacting? Jason stood up straighter, and his voice carried the full force of his presence. Joy, you've spent the last 40 minutes trying to humiliate me on national television, and now you think I'm overreacting for defending myself? He turned slightly to address the cameras directly. This is what passes for journalism on daytime television, folks. This is what happens when someone confuses having an opinion with having insight. Joy doesn't know the first thing about what it takes to make a film, what it takes to build a career, or what it takes to actually contribute something positive to the world. Joy was stammering now. That's not fair, I never said. You said plenty. Jason cut her off. You said my work was mindless. You said I was irresponsible. You said I was wasting my talent. You said I was contributing to societal problems. And now you want to pretend like that wasn't an attack? The other hosts were looking everywhere except at Jason and Joy. The audience was so quiet you could hear individual people breathing. The camera operators kept zooming in on Joy's face, which was now showing a mixture of anger, embarrassment, and something that might have been fear. I have the right to express my opinion, Joy said weakly. And I have the right to call out your opinion as uninformed, mean-spirited, and hypocritical, Jason replied immediately. You talk about toxic masculinity, but what would you call using your platform to tear down someone who can't fight back on equal terms? What would you call ambushing a guest who came here expecting a professional interview? Joy's voice was barely above a whisper now. I wasn't ambushing anyone. Then what would you call it? Jason demanded. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you decided before I even walked in here that you were going to make me the villain in whatever narrative you had planned for today's show. He shook his head in disgust. You know what the real tragedy is here, Joy? You had a chance to have an interesting conversation with someone who's dedicated his life to entertaining people. You could have asked about the craft of acting, about working with directors, about the evolution of action cinema. Instead, you chose to be small, petty, and cruel. Joy tried one more time to regain some semblance of control. I think you're being unfair to me, Jason. I was just trying to. To what? Jason interrupted. To embarrass me? To make yourself look smart by making me look stupid? To prove some point about masculinity by being more aggressive than any man would dare to be on television? The words hit their mark. Joy's face crumpled slightly, and for a moment she looked genuinely hurt. But Jason wasn't finished. You want to talk about responsibility, Joy? How about your responsibility to treat people with basic human decency? How about your responsibility to your audience to have guests on who can actually contribute to meaningful conversation instead of just serving as targets for your frustrations? He started moving toward the edge of the set. How about your responsibility to yourself to be better than this? Joy finally found some of her fight again.